How could one of the world's most powerful armies collapse in just 46 days? Imagine spending 20 years preparing for the next war, building massive fortifications, training millions of soldiers, stockpiling thousands of tanks and artillery pieces, believing your country is ready for anything. Then, in less than 7 weeks, everything is gone. In June 1940, German soldiers marched beneath the Arc de Triomphe as swastika flags flew over Paris. The cafes were silent. Government buildings stood abandoned. The capital of one of Europe's greatest military powers had fallen without a major battle in its streets. Only 6 weeks earlier, almost no one believed such a defeat was possible. France possessed one of the largest armies in the world. Its tanks matched Germany's, and the mighty Maginot Line was considered one of the strongest defensive systems ever built. So what happened? How did a nation that expected to stop another German invasion collapse faster than anyone thought possible? The answer wasn't that France lacked courage. It wasn't that it lacked soldiers. It wasn't even that Germany had overwhelming numbers. The real answer lies in a series of decisions made long before the first German tank crossed the border. To understand why France fell so quickly, we must go back more than 20 years, to the end of another war that shaped every decision France would make. The First World War left scars that could never fully heal. France had won the war, but victory came at an unimaginable price. Entire villages disappeared beneath artillery fire. More than 1 million French soldiers never returned home, and millions more carried wounds that lasted a lifetime. For those who survived, the memory of endless trenches and relentless shelling became a warning that another war like it must never happen again. That determination shaped France's future. Military planners, politicians, and engineers all worked toward the same goal, not winning the next war quickly, but preventing another national catastrophe. Ironically, that determination would become one of France's greatest weaknesses. While France was preparing to stop yesterday's war, Germany was quietly preparing to fight tomorrow's. During the 1920s and 1930s, France invested enormous resources in protecting its eastern border. The centerpiece of that strategy was the Maginot Line, a vast chain of underground forts, artillery positions, tunnels, and reinforced bunkers stretching along much of the frontier with Germany. It was one of the most ambitious defensive projects ever built and reflected France's belief that strong fortifications could prevent another devastating invasion. But walls alone were never the entire plan. French military doctrine assumed that if Germany attacked again, the invasion would resemble the First World War. The Maginot Line would slow the enemy, giving France time to mobilize its army and coordinate with Britain. It was a logical strategy based on the last conflict, a conflict fought with trenches, heavy artillery, and gradual advances measured in yards rather than miles. For years, that strategy appeared sound. The French army remained one of the largest in Europe. Its soldiers were well trained, its artillery was respected, and many of its tanks were heavily armored. Across Europe, few doubted that France could defend itself if another war began. Yet beneath that confidence lay dangerous assumptions. Political instability had weakened long-term military planning, and many senior commanders believed that caution was safer than innovation. New ideas about fast-moving armored warfare were often viewed with skepticism. The army had become exceptionally good at fighting the kind of war it already understood. Across the border, Germany had reached a very different conclusion. Its generals believed the next war would not be won by the strongest defenses. It would be won by the fastest decisions. And somewhere deep inside the German high command, a daring plan was taking shape, one that depended on attacking where France felt safest. France believed the next war would unfold slowly. Germany intended to end it before France could even react. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, Germany began rebuilding its military at a remarkable pace. New aircraft rolled off factory assembly lines. Armored divisions expanded year after year. But Germany's greatest innovation wasn't a new tank or a new airplane. It was a new way of thinking. Instead of treating tanks, infantry, artillery, and aircraft as separate branches, German commanders trained them to fight as one. Every attack would be coordinated. Every breakthrough would be exploited immediately. Radios connected tank commanders to headquarters and to the Luftwaffe overhead, allowing decisions to be made in minutes instead of hours. While one unit pinned the enemy down, Another raced around its flank. The goal was never to destroy every defensive position. It was to keep moving until the entire enemy front collapsed. Many later called this strategy Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. It wasn't simply about speed. It was about creating chaos faster than the enemy could understand what was happening. France had capable tanks and brave soldiers, but its military still relied on slower methods of command. Orders often traveled through telephone lines, written dispatches, and layers of headquarters before reaching the front. By the time commanders understood a crisis, the battlefield had already changed. The German High Command knew it could not win by attacking France where its defenses were strongest. So it designed a plan based on deception. The attack through Belgium would look like the main invasion, drawing the best Allied armies north. But hidden behind that diversion, the real blow would fall somewhere almost everyone considered impossible, deep inside the forests of the Ardennes. At dawn on May 10, 1940, the plan was finally set in motion. At dawn on May 10, 1940, German forces attacked. Across Europe, the invasion appeared to confirm every prediction the Allied commanders had made. German troops poured into the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, while paratroopers captured key bridges and crossroads. News reports focused on the fighting in Belgium, and the French High Command believed it had correctly identified the main German assault. They reacted exactly as planned. France's best armies, together with the British Expeditionary Force, advanced north into Belgium to meet what they believed would be the decisive battle. It was exactly what Germany wanted. While the Allies rushed toward Belgium, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers, supported by nearly 2,000 tanks, were moving somewhere else entirely. Hidden beneath the thick forests of the Ardennes, endless columns of armored vehicles, trucks, artillery, and engineers crept along narrow mountain roads in one of the riskiest operations of the war. The gamble was enormous. The roads were so narrow that traffic stretched for miles. A successful Allied air attack could have blocked the routes, trapping the entire armored force inside the forest. But the attack never came. French commanders remained convinced that the Ardennes was too rugged for a major armored offensive. Only lightly defended units guarded the region because it was considered a natural obstacle rather than a likely battlefield. For 3 tense days, the German columns pushed forward almost unnoticed. Then, on May 12th, they emerged from the forest overlooking the Meuse River near the town of Sedan. French reconnaissance reports began arriving at headquarters, warning of an unexpectedly large German force. But many senior officers struggled to believe what they were hearing. Surely no modern army could have crossed the Ardennes so quickly. By the time doubt turned into action, it was already too late. Germany had achieved what every successful military commander dreams of: complete strategic surprise. The fate of France would now be decided on the banks of the Meuse. On May 13, 1940, the battle for Sedan began. For the French army, the Meuse River was the last major barrier before the open countryside beyond. If the crossings could be held, the German advance might still be stopped. But the defenders at Sedan were not France's strongest divisions. Many were reserve units, assigned to what had long been considered a quiet sector. Then the sky erupted. Hundreds of Luftwaffe aircraft descended on French positions in one of the heaviest air attacks of the campaign. Bombs pounded artillery batteries, bunkers, and command posts. Telephone lines were severed. Headquarters lost contact with frontline units. Amid the explosions, rumors spread faster than reliable information, and confusion quickly turned into panic. As smoke covered the river, German assault teams crossed the Meuse in inflatable boats. Under constant fire, engineers rushed to construct pontoon bridges, while infantry fought to expand the fragile bridgeheads on the western bank. Within hours, the first German tanks began rolling across the river. French commanders ordered immediate counterattacks, but their response came too slowly. Messages passed through multiple headquarters before reaching frontline units. By the time many orders arrived, German armored columns had already pushed beyond the river and were driving deeper into France. Meanwhile, German tank commanders coordinated every movement by radio, adapting to opportunities almost as quickly as they appeared. French soldiers fought stubbornly in many sectors, but isolated acts of resistance could not stop a breakthrough that was growing wider by the hour. By the evening of May 14th, the defensive line at Sedan had been fatally breached. For Germany, it was a victory. For France, it was the beginning of collapse. The panzer divisions no longer turned toward Paris. They turned west, toward the English Channel. And with every mile they advanced, they moved closer to trapping the Allied armies in northern France. The breakthrough at Sedan became a full-scale collapse. Instead of slowing down to destroy every French position, the German panzer divisions pressed relentlessly westward. Their commanders knew that speed was now their greatest weapon. Every hour gained meant less time for the Allies to regroup, and every mile advanced pushed the French army closer to disaster. French headquarters struggled to keep pace. Reports often described where German tanks had been, not where they were. By the time fresh orders reached frontline commanders, the battlefield had already changed. Entire divisions found themselves fighting an enemy that had moved far beyond their maps. Then came another catastrophe. As news of the German advance spread, millions of French civilians fled their homes. Families packed whatever they could carry onto cars, bicycles, horse-drawn wagons, and handcarts, filling every major road leading south. The mass exodus became one of the largest refugee movements in European history. Highways that the French army desperately needed for reinforcements and supplies became clogged with frightened civilians. Fuel trucks, artillery, and fresh troops crawled forward behind endless columns of refugees. On May 20th, German tanks reached the English Channel. In just 10 days, they had cut the Allied armies in two. To the north, the British Expeditionary Force, together with hundreds of thousands of French and Belgian soldiers, was trapped against the coast. Escape by land was impossible. Only the sea remained. From May 26th to June 4th, an extraordinary rescue unfolded at Dunkirk. Royal Navy warships, merchant vessels, fishing boats, and hundreds of civilian craft crossed the channel again and again under relentless air attack. Against all expectations, more than 300,000 British and French soldiers were evacuated to Britain. It was a remarkable achievement, but it came at a devastating cost. Nearly all of their tanks, artillery, trucks, and heavy equipment had to be abandoned on the beaches. Britain had saved its army. France had lost its best one. With the Allies shattered and northern France exposed, nothing stood between the German army and the nation's heart. The road to Paris was now wide open. By early June 1940, the outcome was becoming impossible to ignore. After the evacuation at Dunkirk, Germany launched a second offensive, Fall Gelb, or Case Red, to destroy what remained of the French army. Exhausted French units attempted to establish new defensive lines along the Somme and Aisne rivers, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and constantly forced to retreat. Every day, German forces pushed deeper into France. Inside the French government, a different battle was unfolding. Prime Minister Paul Reynaud argued that France should continue the war from its overseas territories in North Africa. Others believed that further resistance would only bring more death and destruction to the French people. As German armies approached Paris, the government became bitterly divided, and every passing hour made the decision more urgent. On June 14, 1940, German troops entered Paris. The city had been declared an open city, sparing it from a destructive urban battle. French forces withdrew before the Germans arrived, hoping to preserve one of Europe's greatest cultural capitals. Even so, the sight of German soldiers marching beneath the Arc de Triomphe and Nazi flags flying over Paris sent shockwaves around the world. It was an image few believed they would ever witness. 2 days later, Paul Reynaud resigned. Leadership passed to Marshal Philippe Pétain, the celebrated hero of the Battle of Verdun during the First World War. Convinced that France could no longer continue the fight, Pétain requested an armistice. On June 22, 1940, French representatives signed the agreement in the forest of Compiègne. Hitler deliberately chose the same railway carriage where Germany had accepted defeat in 1918. It was more than a military victory. It was a carefully staged act of revenge before the eyes of the world. The armistice divided France into two parts. The North and West came under direct German occupation, while the South became the so-called Vichy France, a government that would increasingly collaborate with Nazi Germany. In just 46 days, one of Europe's most powerful nations had fallen. But the greatest lesson of France's defeat was not that its soldiers failed. It was that its strategy had. For generations, the fall of France has been dismissed with a simple myth that the French refused to fight. The historical record tells a different story. French soldiers resisted fiercely throughout the campaign, often under impossible conditions. Their defeat was not the result of cowardice, but of a chain of strategic failures. France prepared for another First World War, while Germany pioneered a new style of warfare built on speed, surprise, radios, and coordinated attacks. The breakthrough through the Ardennes, the collapse at Sedan, the refugee crisis, and the encirclement of Allied forces combined to overwhelm a nation that had expected a very different war. In only 6 weeks, the balance of power in Europe changed forever. France had fallen. Now Britain stood alone. The next battle would not be fought in forests or across rivers, but high above the English countryside, where the future of Europe would hang in the skies. Thank you for being with us. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to History Ledger and join us for more fact-based documentaries.